My name is Tiffany Q, and welcome to my ABRSM Grade 5 Theory Lessons series, where I record snippets of my live lessons with my students. Please note that this is not a substitute for a textbook. If you're preparing for the theory exam, I would still recommend having a teacher to guide you through both the coursework and exam paper preparation. Technical names for degree of scales. The degree of a scale is simply what note it is in the scale. So is it the first note of the scale, the second note of the scale, the third note, etc. It's the position in which a note appears in the scale, be it major or minor. Technical names are not like solfege. So if you've learned solfege with any of your teachers in the past, you will know that for major scales it's do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. And then for the minor scales, it actually starts on la. So la, ti, do, re, mi, and then depending on whether it's harmonic or melodic, it's mi, fi, si, la for melodic, and then mi, fa, si, la. Anyway, technical names are separate. The names are both the same in major and minor. So the first note of a scale is called the tonic. The second note is called the supertonic, and then so on and so forth. Mediant, subdominant, dominant, submediant, and leading note. Unfortunately, you are just going to have to learn this off by heart. So be able to rhyme off these words exactly in the order that you see them. In the exam, this is the last question for the keys and scales section. I would highly recommend that you write out this as your rough work so you can refer to it easily. There are some ways of memorizing. So tonic is generally one that people are okay with because they've heard it before. You are taught this word in grade 3. So tonic, supertonic, I think that's okay. The dominant in English is something that's quite important or strong, and the fifth note or the fifth chord, when we look at chords, tends to be a very strong sort of presence in a key, so it's called dominant. And then the second sort of, third. So tonic is the strongest, then we have the dominant, and then the subdominant. Leading note is generally fine as well. People remember that it's the last note. You're probably wondering, why are there only 7 when there are 8 notes in a scale? Well, the tonic note is the same for the first and the 8th note, because the scale starts and ends on the same note. Another way you can remember this is by knowing that every second one, so all the even numbers, start with an S. Supertonic, subdominant, submediant. So if you're writing this out and you see 2 S's in a row, then you might spot a mistake. Tonic, supertonic, median, subdominant, dominant, submediant, and leading note. Here I have G flat major. And then here I have G sharp minor. I'm going to pick a random note from the scale. This one here. That is a C flat, and a C flat would be known as a subdominant of G flat major. If I take out this note, because that's a 7th note, that would be the leading note of G sharp minor. If I ask you, what was the mediant note of a key or a scale, then you should be able to tell me. In the exam, the way they word it is, they will say, for example, an A flat is a supertonic of G flat major. True or false? So you need to know your scales very well, and you also need to know these technical names. If they give you a minor, and you're not sure whether it's melodic or harmonic, keep your options open. So if the note that they show you happens to be in either, then it should be correct. Chromatic scales. Generally, we know what a chromatic scale sounds like. It's a scale that starts and ends on the same note and includes all of the semitones in between the notes. So I will give you an example from D to D. So the chromatic scale of D would start from one, end on the other, include all the semitones. I'm going to play it here. In theory, there are very specific rules on how we actually write the chromatic scale on the stave. And in the exam, they will give you 2 chromatic scales. Your job is to check whether or not they have been written correctly. And I would follow these 3 steps first before checking the notes. If you check it in this order, 1, 2, 3, you're guaranteed to save your time. So the step 1. The scale should start and end on the same note. Not the same pitch, the same note. What do I mean by that? Say it starts on C sharp. It must then end also on C sharp, which is this note here. If it ends on a D flat, technically that's an enharmonic note. It's the same pitch, but it's not the same note. They must be called the exact same name. So that's the first thing you check. If they are different, the first and last notes, then you know that there is something wrong. So once the scale passes this test, we move on to the next one. There should be 13 notes in total, going up or going down one way. They will only give you the chromatic scale going either up or down. They won't give it to you ascending and descending. So there should be 13 notes. So you should count the notes. And then the third step or rule, every line and space needs to have at least 1 note or 2 notes on it. If there is no note, or if there are 3 notes on a line or space, then it is wrong. I'm just going to quickly demonstrate that on some manuscript. Just like a major or minor scale, there should be a note on every line and space between one note and the other in an octave. In a chromatic scale, in no particular order, if I jump this space over here and I go from a C directly to an E, that will be considered incorrect. So I cannot skip one. I also cannot have 3 notes on the same position. So that cannot be a D flat, D natural, and then D sharp. So grammatically speaking and theoretically speaking, that would be incorrect, even if the pitches are okay and technically chromatic. So every line and space needs to have at least 1 or 2. No more, no less. Once all of these checks are done, then you go to your keyboard sketch. Important that you have a keyboard sketch, because then you can check every single note. Is it chromatic? Okay. Obviously, if you check the scale and it goes from a C to a D and then backwards to a C sharp, then that's incorrect, or to a D flat. The last tip that I have is that if you have a chromatic scale in a difficult clef, for example, a tenor or alto clef, a clef that isn't your strongest clef, then either be extremely careful or write out all the note names underneath the notes. So if you have like an alto clef scale, just write down G sharp, A, name the notes directly one by one and then check it, because sometimes if we're just reading it and then checking our keyboard, we might just miscount something by mistake. This question is really quite straightforward as long as you follow these rules and you know exactly how it works. Here are some examples of chromatic scales and their mistakes. So the first one here, I'm going to treat all of these like the exam. Does it start and end on the same note? This is a C, this is a C. Yes, it starts and ends on the same note. Are there 13 notes? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Yes, so that's step 2 done. Step 3. Does every line and space have at least 1 or 2 notes? Well, I see a D is missing here, so there's no note in this position. And I see there are 3 E's and there are 4 A's, so that's incorrect. I don't even need to check the notes individually. So that's wrong. Looking at this one, does it start and end on the same note? Yes. Are there 13 notes? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Yes. Does every line and space have at least 1 or 2 notes? Well, I can see 2 C's here. Actually that's 2. 2 D's. 1, 2, 2, 2, 1, 1. That's completely fine. The final thing we check is the actual pitches. So I would recommend that you have a keyboard. I'm going to play this on my keyboard now. See? So that is correct. Next one. Does it start and end on the same note? Yes. Are there 13 notes? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. No, that's immediately wrong. Don't need to check anything else. And then finally, this one. Does it start and end on the same note? No. This is a C, this is a B sharp. Technically it's the same pitch, not the same note. Bye-bye, move on. So following these steps will save you time, because for example, if you started off by checking all the notes to see if they were correctly in the chromatic scale, all the kind of right pitches, then you're really wasting your time because it's incorrect. So once you get to the last one, you have already wasted a few minutes. So if you follow these steps, you get a very sort of accurate depiction of whether it's incorrect or correct, and it saves time. That's a win-win.